I'll keep go through things as quick as possible. And thanks to each of the farm organisations that are here before us today. And in fairness, they've been with us all along, and I suppose leading us in the right direction in relation to some of these schemes that are as they've been developed. I suppose CAP is what it looks to me is it's losing its value. And when you hear some of the organisations say here today that over half the farmers in the country will not be able to access some of the agri schemes, it's quite scary. And at the same time, we're being told that farming is being led for 37% of the fault, as which Mr. Keller said there a while ago. But we're not going to get 37% of the money to compensate or to get farmers to help them change. Just a few things there. You were saying we'll just in relation to the acre scheme have farm planners are finding it very, very difficult to make sure that they'll get all these plans in before the deadline, the end of November. Is there any talks of, or have you any inkling got from the Minister that there'll be an extension of time? And also, I suppose there's going to be, there's 50,000 applications, only going to be 30,000 allowed. What's going to happen to the other 20,000? And I suppose when it comes to what's the proposal for young new farmers as well? And was there any thought of a retirement scheme for farmers that are there and need to, I suppose, step aside and might take a little bit of an early retirement if they thought that there was some bit of an incentive there and bringing new farmers there. Also, in any of the schemes, is there any proposal to help beef finishers achieve younger slaughter dates? We'll say, given that the department sees this as a key element in reducing emissions, and given that finishing cattle earlier is unaffordable at the current beef prices and the current cattle ration prices. Is there any proposals, we'll say, to help beef finishers, we'll say, in any of these proposals? And I think, Mr. McCormick there, you said that about solar panels, he put forward a proposal in relation to solar panels, and I'd like to know why is that going to go ahead, or why didn't it go ahead, or is there any indication? I mean, they're talking about encouraging farmers to use solar, and everyone as in fairness, but like this would have been an ideal opportunity for that to happen. So yeah, I appreciate maybe if the IFA and the ICSA were able to answer some of them questions, or anyone else as well that are here today. Thanks.
Okay. Acres, if the IFA would address acres, I'll ask Mockra to talk about the early retirement scheme. I used to say the early finishers and the solar panels to Pat McCormick. Yeah, Michael, Mr. Biggins.
Thanks, Chair. Well, look, on acres, it's been 2 years in gestation, as I call it, and people are supposed to be able to sign up in 6 weeks. It's a fiasco out there as regards with planners and consultants on that. They're actually closing their doors to clients at this stage. There is talks of a 2 weeks extension, Chairman. That won't suffice. It's not. They're just not able to get their clients signed up on that in short space of time. We would suggest it going to the end of the year, and then in January deciding who gets, as regards who qualifies on that. As well, I think what would take the heat out of the whole situation, Chairman, would be if the department were to come out and say that people that get into tranche 1, they'll qualify for a payment in 2023, or in tranche 2, should I say, excuse me. People that don't get into tranche 1, okay, this current tranche, but that they get into tranche 2, if the department come out and say that they will get a payment in 2023, because farmers can't afford a gap year. If you look at the Chagas National Farm Survey for 2021, 42.1% of cattle rearing farmers' incomes came from glass. 42% of their income came from glass from 2017 to 2021. And in other cattle and sheep farms, it nearly accounted for 25%. So those farmers that just can't afford a situation where they're not in an acre scheme or an environmental scheme. But as I said, there's a way around it. If the department come out, and it will take the heat out of this mad rush to get into tranche 1, if the department come out and say, we'll guarantee you that there'll be an upfront payment in 2023, as was done in reps. There's precedent there. So if they come out and say they will make a payment, they'll get an upfront payment for people remember that tranche 2 is not opening until the 4th quarter of 2023. the last quarter of next year, tranche 2 opens. And that's why farmers they're absolutely at loggerheads with their planners. And, and the planners are in a no-win situation because these are their clients and they have to refuse them.
Okay.
And they're just, it's just creating it's creating a logjam that's not necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mark on the early retirement.
As well, in terms, Deputy, your question in relation to what's been done for young farmers in relation to the cap, the honest answer is limited or very limited improvement in where we have been. The same measures have been in place now since 2014. We're proposing to do the same measures for the next 5 years until 2027 as we've done since 14, and we're expecting a different outcome. I think Einstein had a fairly good summation of what that will hopefully achieve by the end of 2027. We're the only member state, as I said, not to go for installation aid. Our own minister, to be fair, when he was in the EU in the Council of Ministers, was pushing for a 4% to be the minimum threshold for young farmers to give some flexibility under Pillar 1 payments. And came back to us and delivered 3% in our own CAP strategic plan. We do welcome the higher rate of payment in the young farmer scheme, but overall, in terms of getting more young people into the sector, very little additional has been provided for in this budget. And in terms of a retirement scheme, I might ask Liam just to give an overview of that.
No, I'm going to look one go on now. I wouldn't in the second IFA man now, so I'm not going in the second man.
For longer, Chairman, so if you're giving
I have to try and keep it balanced now, John, so go on.
In terms then of the succession scheme, the early retirement scheme, and Deputy, we have put forward consistently a non-farm succession scheme. We recognise that the early retirement scheme had its own failings in terms of older farmers and not being allowed to stay farming, but also getting them out of farming earlier wasn't conducive with their, I suppose, lifestyle or ambitions. We've put forward a succession scheme, a proposal to the Department many times about supporting older farmers to step back at the rates of minimum wage, which we don't feel is an excessive payment to be paying someone with the amount of experience that they have, while also providing support through investment support, capital investment support and access to low-cost finance, as well as the suite of measures in terms of tax to support young farmers to access, while also supporting older farmers to step back. There is succession schemes in place in other EU member states. Ours is largely based on the success of some of those. That's the measure we feel will drive the change of the age profile in farming population here.
ICSA on the early finishing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the really critical thing to start with is that all of our farming systems, dairy, suckler, beef, sheep, tillage, are hugely interdependent. And there needs to be a lot more thought put into that reality, because you don't see it in the way in which the cap has emerged as a series of payments, and you don't see it either in terms of where we are with climate change now. So the beef sector is absolutely critical to the sustainability of dairying and sucklers. Without the dairying and sucklers, or without the beef, you can't have dairying and suckling. And in particular, I say that we're very much in favour of live exports of calves and of older stock. But there are threats coming down the track here. So we have to be cognizant of the need to have a viable beef finishing sector. And we also have to look at this now in terms of the climate action discussions under the Beef Vision Group, where, look, the reality is we have 1.6 million dairy cows, we have 875,000 suckler cows, and in an ideal world, we wouldn't see any significant drop in those numbers. We'd actually like to see space for some people to even expand their enterprise, and overall to try and keep our really important 15.4 billion agri-export business up and running. But one of the things, therefore, that is being discussed is how can we reduce emissions, and one of the key ideas put forward by the department is that we should try and reduce average slaughter age. This is not a realistic proposition given current meal prices and current cattle prices. So we think we have to give consideration to that. Our view is that there will have to be some sort of a package for beef finishers which is designed to improve their viability, but is maybe linked to this climate change emissions target as well. The reality is that if we don't find a holistic way of dealing with this, and we also have to look at the calibre of calves that beef finishers are being asked to rear. If we don't look at this in a very integrated way, we are going to have serious difficulties with our climate targets. We're going to have serious difficulties with the viability of the beef finishing sector. And if there's no one to finish the calves, then the suckler sector and the dairy sector have a real existential crisis coming down the tracks. So our view is that we need to look at a payment, and it's going to have to come from somewhere outside of the cap. Initially, we had proposed that some of the cap money will be directed to beef finishers. Cap is now allocated, and I think, as has been pointed out by our President, there is a massive cost accepted by the government, 125 billion for our entire climate action plan. Some of that is private money, some of it is government money, some of it is old money, some of it is new money. But it is quite clear that we need an honest appraisal of how and where we are going to get money to help farmers to deliver on these very ambitious climate targets, a lot of which, and a lot of what is being discussed in the Beef Vision Group is highly problematic. But I think we have to start with money for beef finishers to finish earlier.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick.
Yeah, I will be brief. I suppose the question was on solar panels and the eco scheme. Obviously, you know, the eco scheme is quite rigid. The menu, shall we say, for selection to meet the second criteria, we felt there was an opportunity there, as I said in my outline, for either milk carton or indeed solar panels. But I suppose it shows that the issue that we face, and obviously today is about CAP, but from an environmental perspective, where it wasn't funded, it wasn't one of the measures that could be used in an eco scheme, and yet it's a significant impact. It would have had a significant impact in a positive way on our national inventory from an energy perspective, but not from an agricultural perspective, and that is hugely frustrating for farm families out there. We would acknowledge the availability going forward of a 60% TAMS grant aid on solar panels, because we do believe, you know, and Eddie mentioned the fact that in agriculture we need to be cross-dependent, but if we're to meet our national targets, we need joint up thinking there as well in the various sectors, and there is a huge opportunity to reduce energy usage on farms with the availability of solar panels as we move forward. But unfortunately, for those farmers, it's not an option that can qualify them for an eco scheme, and we feel that's a missed opportunity. It would have been a significant incentive.